The great ships moved through space like hungry beasts. Their black hulls gleamed with a wet shine as if they were alive. In many ways they were. The Kethmoran had grown their vessels from their own flesh and bone, feeding them metal and energy until they became something more than ships. They were extensions of their creator's will, hungry for destruction. Captain Zexthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Render. His 7-foot frame cast a long shadow across the organic controls that pulsed with a sickly green light. His claws clicked against the living metal as he watched the scanner displays. Another convoy was approaching the Vega system. Another chance to feed. 3 cargo ships, his Lieutenant Kexmar reported. The smaller alien's voice carried the same hungry tone that all Kethmoran used when discussing prey. Standard Arcturian design. They carry rare metals from the mining worlds. Zexthal's lips pulled back, showing rows of sharp teeth. The Arcturians were good prey. They ran fast but never fought back. Their ships would provide excellent materials for the fleet, and their crews would serve as examples to other species that might think of resisting. For 300 years, the Kethmoran Syndicate had ruled the dark spaces between stars. No fleet could match them. No strategy could defeat them. They had tried everything the galaxy could throw at them. The Crystalline Empire had sent their geometric battle formations, ships that moved in perfect mathematical patterns. The Kethmoran had simply adapted their tactics, learning to predict the crystal being's rigid thinking. Within months, the Empire's trade routes were in ruins. The Nebula Collective had tried their phase shift attacks, ships that could become like gas and strike from unexpected angles. But the Kethmoran ships could taste energy in all its forms. They learned to hunt the phase-shifted vessels like bloodhounds following a scent trail. Even the mighty sectoid Dominion, with their billion-strong hive mind controlling thousands of ships at once, had fallen to Kethmoran cunning. Zexthal himself had led the attack that severed the psychic links between their vessels, turning their greatest strength into chaos. Every species in the galaxy knew the truth. When the Kethmoran came, you ran or you died. There was no third option. "Take us to intercept," Zexthal commanded. Standard hunting formation. The Bone Render and its escort ships changed course, their living hulls rippling as they accelerated. The biomechanical engines fed on stored energy, converting it to thrust with an efficiency that made other species envious. The ships themselves grew stronger with each victory, incorporating the best elements of their defeated enemies. As they approached the convoy, Zexthal felt the familiar thrill of the hunt. 3 cargo ships meant good salvage, and enough crew members to make the attack worthwhile. The Arcturians would probably try to run as they always did. It would be over quickly, but as the scanner displays updated, something seemed wrong. These weren't Arcturian ships. The hull designs were different, smoother somehow. The energy signatures didn't match any known species in the galactic database. "Unknown vessels," Kexmar reported, his voice uncertain. "I cannot identify their origin." Zexthal studied the displays more carefully. The ships were smaller than typical cargo vessels, but they moved with surprising grace. Their formation was loose, almost casual, as if they weren't aware of the danger approaching them. "Perhaps a new species," Zexthal said finally. "The galaxy is large. We cannot know every primitive race that crawls between the stars." He activated the communication system, sending out the standard demand on all frequencies. His voice carried the authority of 3 centuries of successful raids. "Unknown vessels, you have entered Kethmoran space. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in the destruction of your ships and the death of your crews." The response came back in a language the translation systems had never heard before. The words were soft, almost musical, but they carried a strange undertone that made Zexthal's spine tingle. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the merchant vessel New Horizon. We are peaceful traders from Earth, carrying agricultural supplies to the outer colonies. We mean no harm to anyone. Earth." The name meant nothing to Zexthal, but the tone of the response intrigued him. Most species begged when faced with Kethmoran ships. These creatures sounded calm, almost conversational. "Your origins do not matter," Zexthal replied. "Surrender now, and some of you may live to serve." There was a pause before the human captain responded. When she spoke again, her voice carried a note that Zexthal had never heard from prey before. It sounded almost disappointed. "I was hoping we could avoid this," she said. "My people are new to this part of space." "We don't want trouble with anyone," Zexthal's claws clicked with amusement. You have no choice in the matter. We are Kethmoran. We take what we want. I see, the human said quietly. In that case, I guess we'll have to decline your offer. The communication ended, and Zexthal stared at the display in confusion. Decline? What did that mean? Prey didn't decline. They begged, they ran, or they died. Those were the only options. Sir, Kexmar said, his voice worried. The unknown ships are not fleeing. They appear to be regrouping. Zexthal watched as the three human ships moved into a tight triangle formation. It wasn't a standard defensive pattern used by any known species. It looked almost organic, like a pack of animals preparing to fight. Interesting, Zexthal murmured. Perhaps these humans have some fight in them. It has been too long since we faced real resistance. He gave the order to attack, expecting the usual quick victory. The Kethmoran ships were faster, stronger, and better armed than anything these unknown humans could field. It should have been over in minutes, but as the battle began, Zexthal realized that something was very different about these humans. They didn't fight like other species. They didn't use standard tactics or predictable maneuvers. Instead, they seemed to anticipate every move the Kethmoran made, responding with tactics that made no sense but somehow worked. When the Bone Render fired its main weapons, the human ships didn't try to dodge the beams. Instead, they used coordinated movements to ensure that only one ship took damage while the other two positioned themselves for counterattacks. When Kexmar tried to use the standard flanking maneuver, the humans somehow predicted it and turned the trap back on the Kethmoran escorts. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to be learning during the fight. Each time the Kethmoran tried a tactic, the human response was faster and more effective. It was as if they were studying their enemies while fighting them. The battle lasted longer than any Kethmoran raid in recent memory. When it finally ended, one human ship was destroyed and another was badly damaged, but they had also managed to cripple one of Zexthal's escort vessels and damage the Bone Render itself. As the surviving human ships limped away, Zexthal stood in his damaged bridge and tried to understand what had just happened. In 300 years of raiding, no prey had ever fought back so effectively. No enemy had ever made the Kethmoran pay such a price for victory. But what bothered him most was the way the humans had fought. They hadn't just been defending themselves. They had been studying the Kethmoran, learning their weaknesses, preparing for future encounters. For the first time in his long life, Zexthal felt something he had never experienced before. He felt like the prey. Across the galaxy, the revolution was spreading. On the mining world of Karathi Prime, worker Zeth crouched behind a pile of ore containers, clutching a weapon built from mining equipment. Around him, hundreds of his fellow Karathi were preparing for the final assault on the Hegemony Command Center. Brothers and sisters, Zeth called out, today we follow the human example. Today we choose death over slavery. The transmission from Earth had changed everything. For 200 years, the Karathi had accepted their fate. They worked in the mines, produced ore for hegemony ships, and died quietly when they became too old to work. But the human message had awakened something they thought was dead, their warrior spirit. Remember the humans of the Harmony, shouted another Karathi fighter. They offered peace and were answered with violence. They showed us that some things are worth dying for. The attack began at dawn. Karathi fighters poured out of their hiding places, charging the hegemony garrison with makeshift weapons and fierce determination. They had studied human military history from the transmitted data. They used guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, and most importantly, they refused to surrender. The hegemony soldiers were shocked. For decades, the Karathi had been model slaves, quiet, obedient, broken. Now they fought like demons, caring nothing for their own safety. When cornered, they detonated explosive charges rather than be captured. Commander Vess, the hegemony officer in charge of the planet, watched the rebellion unfold from his command bunker. How many troops do we have left? He asked his aide. 30% casualties, sir. The rebels are using human tactics. They're unpredictable. Vess slammed his fist on the table. They're supposed to be broken. We've controlled them for 2 centuries. The human transmission changed them, sir. They're fighting like they have nothing to lose. On the insect world of Vexar, a similar uprising was taking place. The Vexari had been perfect workers for 50 years, organized, efficient, never causing trouble. But the human example had reminded them of their own history of cooperation and sacrifice. Queen Zix, the last royal survivor of her species, emerged from hiding for the first time in decades. Around her, millions of Vexari workers abandoned their post to join the rebellion. Children of the Hive, she buzzed to her people. The humans have shown us the way. They proved that the strong do not always defeat the brave. They proved that freedom is worth any price. The Vexari used their natural teamwork abilities to devastating effect. They swarmed hegemony positions like a living flood, overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers and coordination. When hegemony ships tried to escape, the Vexari pilots flew their own vessels directly into the enemy engines. Similar uprisings were erupting on dozens of worlds. The hegemony had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for 3,000 years. But suddenly their slaves were no longer afraid. The human transmission had shown them that defeat in battle did not mean defeat in spirit. High Admiral Korth, Supreme Commander of the Hegemony Fleet, stood in his flagship's command center watching reports pour in from across the Empire. Red warning lights covered the galaxy map, each one representing a world in revolt. "Status report," he demanded. His aide, a nervous young officer, consulted his datapad. "Sir, we have active rebellions on 47 worlds. 17 mining stations have been destroyed. 3 entire sectors are in open revolt. How is this possible?" Korth roared. "These species have been slaves for generations. They know they cannot win. Sir, they seem to be following human tactical doctrines. They're not trying to win traditional battles. They're trying to cause maximum damage and inspire others to rebel." Korth studied the tactical display. The pattern was clear. Every uprising had begun after the human transmission reached that world. The humans had not just declared war on the hegemony. They had declared war on the very idea of oppression. "What about the human homeworld?" Korth asked. "Fleet Commander Zeth reports heavy resistance, sir. The humans are difficult to defeat." "Difficult?" Korth's voice was dangerously quiet. "They're one small planet with primitive technology." "Yes, sir, but they refuse to surrender. Our psychological warfare has no effect. When we destroy their ships, they ram ours with the wreckage. When we kill their soldiers, others line up to replace them." Korth turned to his chief strategist, an ancient alien who had planned countless conquests. "Advisor Meln, how do we stop this?" The old advisor was quiet for a long moment. "High Admiral, in 3,000 years of conquest, we have never faced an enemy like this. Other species fight to survive. Humans fight to win. Other species surrender when defeat is certain. Humans fight harder. There must be a way to break them," Korth insisted. "Perhaps," Meln replied slowly, "but breaking humanity may not be enough anymore. Their message has already spread. Their example has inspired others. Even if we destroy Earth completely, the revolution will continue." Back on Earth, General Stone received reports from across the galaxy. The human transmission had done more than warn of war. It had started a galactic revolution. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were suddenly fighting for their freedom. "Sir," Colonel Adams reported, "we're getting messages from rebel groups across the galaxy. They're using our tactical manuals. They're copying our strategies." Stone nodded grimly. "Good. The more worlds that rise up, the thinner the hegemony spreads their forces. But sir," Adams continued, "many of these rebellions will fail. The rebels don't have our weapons or training." "It doesn't matter," Stone replied. "What matters is that they're fighting. Every act of defiance weakens the hegemony's control. Every rebel who dies inspires 10 more to take up arms." On the screen, a message came in from the Karathi rebellion. Seth's battered face appeared, speaking through a translator. "People of Earth," he said, "your courage has given us courage. Your sacrifice has shown us the way. We may die today, but our children will be free because you taught us to fight." Stone felt tears in his eyes. This was not the war humanity had wanted. They had reached out in peace and been answered with violence. But from that violence, something beautiful was emerging. The idea that freedom was worth any price. "Signal all our ships," Stone ordered. "Tell them that the galaxy is watching. Tell them that every battle they fight inspires others to resist oppression. Tell them they're not just fighting for Earth anymore." Captain Rodriguez, still commanding the Vengeance in the ongoing battle around Earth, received the message. Around her, the bridge crew was exhausted from hours of combat. Half her weapons were destroyed, her shields were failing, and enemy ships still outnumbered them 3-1. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, "incoming transmission from the Hegemony flagship." Commander Zeth appeared on the screen. His perfect alien features were twisted with rage and frustration. Human Captain, your resistance is pointless. Even if you win here, the hegemony controls 1,000 worlds. You are just one species. Rodriguez smiled through the blood on her face. Commander, you're wrong about something important. We're not just one species anymore. We're the spark that lights the fire, and fires spread. As if to prove her point, alerts began flashing on the hegemony ship's displays. Reports of new uprisings, failed supply lines, and spreading rebellion flooded their communication channels. The humans had kept their promise. They had made the hegemony regret choosing war over peace, and this was only the beginning. The repair bay of Proxima Trade Station buzzed with activity. Dozens of species worked together to fix damaged ships and trade goods from across the galaxy. The massive station served as a neutral meeting point where even enemies could conduct business under the protection of ancient treaties. Captain Sarah Chen watched the repairs to her ship through the observation window. The New Horizon had taken serious damage in the fight with the Kethmoran, but her crew had managed to keep her flying. More importantly, they had survived their first encounter with the galaxy's most feared pirates. The hull breach on Deck 3 is sealed, her chief engineer reported, but we lost most of our cargo in the attack. The company isn't going to be happy about this. Sarah nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. The fight had taught her important lessons about these Kethmoran. They were strong and their ships were impressive, but they relied too much on fear and intimidation. When faced with opponents who wouldn't break, they seemed almost confused. Captain Chen, a voice behind her made her turn. A tall, blue-skinned alien approached with the careful movements of someone trying not to seem threatening. I am Administrator Veltar of Proxima Station. I wanted to speak with you about your encounter. Sarah gestured to a nearby table in the station's common area. Around them, various alien species conducted their business, but she noticed that many were watching her with curious eyes. Word of the fight had apparently spread quickly. Your people are new to this sector, Veltar said as they sat down. Perhaps you do not fully understand what you have done. We defended ourselves against pirates, Sarah replied simply. Where I come from, that's considered normal behavior. Veltar's large eyes widened. Normal? Captain, no one fights the Kethmoran and lives to discuss it. They are the apex predators of known space. For 3 centuries they have been unstoppable. Well, we stopped them today, Sarah said. Hurt them too, from what I could see. The administrator leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. You must understand, Captain. The Kethmoran do not forget insults. They will come for you again, and next time they will bring more ships. You should take your people and flee to the outer rim. Perhaps you can hide there until they forget about you. Sarah's expression hardened. Humans don't run from bullies. We've learned that lesson the hard way throughout our history. Before Veltar could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red as the station's defense coordinator spoke over the communication system. All civilian vessels prepare for immediate departure. Kethmoran fleet detected approaching this system. This is not a drill. Through the observation windows, Sarah could see ships of every description fleeing the station as fast as their engines could carry them. The vast trading post was emptying within minutes as word spread that the pirates were coming. But Sarah made no move toward her ship. Instead, she activated her personal communicator and spoke to her crew. All hands, this is the captain. The Kethmoran are coming back, probably looking for us. Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle to one of the departing ships. No questions asked, no shame in it. The response came back immediately from her chief engineer. With respect, Captain, go to hell. We're not abandoning you to these monsters. Similar responses came from every member of her crew. Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with worry. Her people were brave, but bravery might not be enough against a Kethmoran fleet. Captain, Veltar said urgently, you must leave now. My scans show at least 20 Kethmoran ships approaching. Your single vessel cannot possibly survive such an attack. Sarah stood and headed toward the docking bay where her ship waited. Then I guess we'll have to make sure we take some of them with us. The New Horizon launched from Proxima Station just as the Kethmoran fleet arrived. 20 ships of various sizes, all bearing the distinctive biomechanical design that made them look like living nightmares. At their head was the massive flagship that Sarah recognized from their previous encounter. Attention, human vessel, came the now familiar voice of Captain Zexthul. You have caused great insult to the Kethmoran. Your death will serve as an example to others who might think to resist us. Sarah activated her own communication system, broadcasting on all frequencies so that anyone still in the system could hear. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of Earth. We're about to show these pirates that humans don't back down from bullies." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The New Horizon was outnumbered 20-1, but her crew fought with a desperate courage that defied logic. They used every trick Sarah had learned in her years of military service, turning their single ship into a force that struck from unexpected angles and disappeared before the Cathamoran could respond effectively. But numbers eventually told. The New Horizon's shields failed under the concentrated fire of multiple enemy ships. Her hull began to rupture as the Catamaran closed in for the kill. In the final moments, as her ship died around her, Sarah made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Instead of surrendering or trying to escape, she programmed her ship's navigation system for a ramming course with Zexthol's flagship. "All hands, abandon ship," she ordered. "Use the escape pods and get clear." "Captain, what about you?" her engineer asked over the communication system. Sarah strapped herself into her command chair and watched the Catamaran flagship grow larger on her screen. "Someone has to guide her in. Make sure they remember what happened here." The New Horizon's engines roared to full power, carrying the dying ship on its final mission. Zexthol's crew saw the attack coming, but their massive ship was too slow to dodge completely. The human vessel struck the flagship's port side, both ships disappearing in a brilliant explosion that lit up the entire system. But Sarah's sacrifice served another purpose. In the moments before impact, she had transmitted a final message on all galactic frequencies. The message contained the exact coordinates of the Catamaran base, intelligence gathered during their previous encounter, and a simple statement that would become humanity's battle cry. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of Earth. The coordinates you're receiving show the location of the main Catamaran base. They killed my crew, destroyed my ship, and think they can terrorize the galaxy without consequences. They're wrong. Humanity remembers our dead, and we never forget our enemies. We're coming for them." Across the galaxy, the message was received by species that had suffered under Catamaran raids for centuries. For the first time, someone had not only fought back against the pirates but had died fighting them. More importantly, someone had promised revenge. In the debris field where both ships had died, Zexthol's escape pod drifted among the wreckage. The Catamaran captain was badly injured but alive, rescued by his surviving ships. As his crew carried him to the medical bay, he kept thinking about the human captain's final words. "Humanity remembers." What kind of species made promises to the dead? What kind of people chose death over surrender when there was no hope of victory? For the first time in his long career as a pirate, Zexthol felt something he had never experienced before. He felt afraid of his prey. The news of the battle spread quickly through galactic communication networks. The impossible had happened. Someone had made the Catamaran pay a real price for their victory. Captain Zexthol's flagship was damaged. Several escort ships had been destroyed or crippled, and the pirates' reputation for invincibility had been shattered. But more important than the tactical victory was the message Sarah Chen had sent. For the first time, the galaxy knew where the Catamaran base was located, and somewhere out there humanity was preparing its response. The age of Catamaran dominance was about to end. Captain Marcus Reed stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching as arguments erupted across the human fleet. For 6 hours, the 800,000 ships had been locked in heated debate. Some commanders wanted to attack immediately, viewing the Vex offer as a trick. Others saw it as humanity's greatest opportunity. The quantum communication link with Keeper Thalon remained open, allowing the Vex representative to observe human nature in its rawest form. Marcus wondered what the ancient being thought as it watched humanity struggle with the biggest decision in their species' history. "Captain?" Dr. Sarah Chen approached him with a data pad. "I've been analyzing the historical records the Vex shared with us. Every species they've encountered followed the same pattern." "What pattern?" "They all reached a point where their technology advanced faster than their wisdom. They could destroy planets but couldn't stop fighting each other. They could extend life but couldn't find meaning in it. They gained the power of gods but kept the hearts of children." Marcus nodded grimly. It sounded familiar. Humanity had nuclear weapons that could destroy worlds, but still fought wars over borders drawn on maps. They had medical technology that could cure diseases, but people still died from poverty and neglect. "Sir," his communications officer called out. Admiral Cross is requesting all fleet commanders join a final vote. The main screen activated, showing hundreds of faces from across the massive fleet. Marcus could see the division immediately. Some commanders had the hard look of warriors ready for battle. Others showed the uncertainty of people facing an impossible choice. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Cross began, we have to make our decision. The Vex are waiting, and every moment we delay costs us credibility. Captain Hendricks from the battleship Retribution spoke first. Admiral, with respect, how can we trust beings who kidnapped millions of our people? They attacked us without warning, without even trying to communicate first. Keeper Thalen's voice flowed through the quantum link, carrying emotions of sadness and regret. We have watched 17 species destroy themselves in the time it takes your sun to travel around your galaxy. Each time we told ourselves we should have acted sooner. With humanity, we chose to preserve what we could before it was too late. You decided we were going to fail without even giving us a chance. Captain Martinez from the cruiser Liberty shot back. Your own projections show the same outcome, Thalen replied gently. Climate collapse within 30 years. Resource wars within 40. Nuclear exchange within 50. We have seen this pattern too many times. Dr. Chen spoke up from her position. But Captain, they're offering to change those projections, to give us the knowledge to avoid those mistakes. And what's to stop them from attacking again if we don't measure up to their standards? Hendricks demanded. Marcus felt the weight of his daughter's message again. Her faith in humanity's ability to overcome challenges. But was she talking about overcoming external threats or internal ones? Admiral, he said, raising his voice above the arguments. May I suggest we ask Keeper Thalen a direct question? The fleet channel fell silent. Go ahead, Captain Reed. Marcus looked directly at the camera, knowing that somewhere the Vex representative was watching. Keeper Thalen, in your millions of years of experience, have you ever encountered a species that surprised you? The pause that followed felt like an eternity. Then through the quantum link came an emotion Marcus hadn't expected. Joy. Yes, Captain Reed. One species has surprised us. Humanity. How? In all our travels, we have never encountered a species that responded to loss with such unity and determination. When we took your 17 colonies, we expected fear, surrender, or perhaps small-scale rescue attempts. We did not expect you to assemble 800,000 warships. The emotion that came through the link was awe mixed with hope. Most species fragment under pressure. Humans seem to strengthen. Most species turn inward when threatened. Humans turn outward toward their enemy. Most species accept loss as inevitable. Humans refuse to accept any loss as permanent. Marcus felt something shift in his understanding. You're saying we already passed a test? You passed the first test simply by being here. No species has ever come looking for what we preserved. They assumed it was gone forever and mourned their loss. Humanity looked at 800,000 warships and said, this is not enough, but it will have to do. Admiral Cross leaned forward. Then why the challenge? Why not just return our colonies? Because we have learned that survival requires more than courage and determination. It requires wisdom, and wisdom cannot be given, it must be earned. Captain Stevens from the destroyer pack spoke up. What exactly does this test involve? The quantum link filled with images and concepts. Marcus saw humanity being given access to the Vex archives, learning about the mistakes that had destroyed countless civilizations. The test wasn't a single challenge, but a continuous one. Could humanity take this knowledge and apply it to avoid their own destructive patterns? You would become students of failure, Thalen explained. Learn from the mistakes of species that came before you. Use their experiences to guide your own development. And if we fail? Admiral Cross asked. Then we preserve what we can of your species and hope the next one we encounter will be wiser. Marcus thought about his daughter again, about the future she was planning to build. A future teaching children on frontier colonies, the same colonies that might be restored if humanity made the right choice. Admiral, he said, I'd like to share something with the fleet. Admiral Cross nodded. Marcus activated his personal communication system, broadcasting his daughter's message to every ship in the Armada. Lisa's face appeared on screens across 800,000 vessels. Her words about human determination and the ability to overcome any challenge reaching millions of ears. When the message ended, Marcus spoke directly to his fellow commanders. My daughter believes in humanity. She believes we can face any challenge and find a way through. But listening to the Vex, I realized the greatest challenge we face isn't out here in space. It's back home in how we choose to treat each other in our world. He paused, looking at the faces of his fellow officers. We came here ready to fight for our species. Maybe the real fight is learning to be worthy of survival. Silence fell across the fleet channel. Marcus could feel the weight of decision pressing down on 800,000 ships. Finally, Admiral Cross spoke. All commanders will vote by fleet sections. The decision must be unanimous among senior officers. The vote took an hour. Section by section, fleet by fleet, humanity's military leaders chose their species' future. When it was done, Admiral Cross looked directly into the camera. Keeper Thalen, humanity accepts your offer. We'll take the test. We'll learn from the mistakes of those who came before us, and we'll prove that humans can be worth saving. The response came as pure emotion through the quantum link. Relief, hope, and something else, pride. Then let us begin, Thalen said. Your colonies will be restored within 1 solar day. Your people will be returned exactly as they were taken. And then, Captain Reed, your species will embark on the greatest journey in the galaxy. The journey from survival to wisdom. Marcus watched as the massive Vex construct began to change, its crystal surfaces reorganizing themselves. In the distance, he could see new structures forming, docking bays large enough to accommodate human ships. Captain, Sarah Chen said quietly, what do you think will happen to us? Marcus thought about the question. 800,000 warships had come here ready for the greatest battle in human history. Instead, they were about to become something unprecedented. Students in a cosmic classroom. I think we're about to find out what humans can become when they're given the chance to learn, instead of fight. As the first human ships began moving toward the Vex construct, Marcus felt his daughter's faith in humanity beginning to seem less like hope and more like prophecy. Humanity had faced its greatest test not with weapons, but with wisdom. The real adventure was just beginning. Years later, Captain Marcus Reed would stand on the bridge of his ship as it approached a distant star system, no longer carrying weapons of war but tools of exploration and preservation. The Defiant had become part of something greater, a joint human-Vex fleet, dedicated to finding and preserving civilizations. Before they destroyed themselves, his daughter Lisa had become one of the first human teachers in the cosmic archives, helping to educate new species in the hard-learned lessons of survival. The 17 colonies had been restored, their people returned with new purpose and knowledge, and humanity had kept its promise. They had learned from the mistakes of 1,000 dead civilizations and used that knowledge to avoid their own destruction. Earth was healing, its people united by the understanding that they were no longer alone in the universe. The greatest victory hadn't been defeating an enemy. It had been discovering that survival required more than strength. It required the wisdom to know when not to fight, and the courage to change. The biomechanical ship screamed as it tore through Earth's atmosphere, its living hull burning away in strips of flesh and metal. Captain Zexthul fought to maintain control as his flagship. The rebuilt Bone Render died around him. The battle in orbit had been a disaster. The combined human and allied fleet had torn his forces apart with tactics he still couldn't fully understand. Now, as his ship plummeted toward the surface of the human homeworld, Zexthul felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of raiding. Complete defeat. The flagship crashed into a forest clearing with the sound of thunder, carving a burning scar across the landscape before finally coming to rest against a hillside. Inside the wreckage, Zexthul pulled himself from the ruins of his command chair, his body broken but his mind still sharp. Emergency lights flickered in the smoky air as he stumbled through corridors that had once been the pride of the Kethmoran fleet. Most of his crew was dead. The ship's biosystems were failing, their organic components dying without the energy needed to sustain them. Through a breach in the hull, Zexthul could see strange lights approaching through the forest. Human vehicles, probably rescue teams coming to search for survivors. He expected them to finish what the battle had started, to execute him as he had executed so many of their kind. Instead, what happened next would haunt him for the brief remainder of his life. The humans who entered his ship were not soldiers. They wore medical insignia and carried equipment designed to save lives, not take them. Their leader, a woman with graying hair and tired eyes, knelt beside him as he lay bleeding on the deck. "Easy there," she said in accented Kethmoran. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Chen. We're here to help. The name struck Zexthul like a physical blow. Chen, the same name as the merchant captain who had died at Proxima Station, the woman whose sacrifice had started this war. You are related to the ship captain? He asked through the pain. Dr. Chen continued working on his wounds as she answered. Sarah was my daughter. She was carrying medical supplies to the outer colonies when you killed her. Zexthul stared at this human woman, who was trying to save the life of the alien who had murdered her child. It made no sense. By every law of nature he understood she should be torturing him, making him pay for what he had done to her family. Why? He whispered. Why do you heal me when I killed your offspring? Dr. Chen looked up from her medical scanner, and Zexthul saw something in her eyes that terrified him more than hatred would have. He saw pity. Because, she said quietly, that's what humans do. We save lives when we can, even the lives of our enemies. Sarah taught me that before she died. She said that what makes us different from monsters isn't our ability to kill, but our choice about when to show mercy. Around them, other human medics worked to stabilize the few surviving Kethmaran crew members. None of them were being executed or tortured. All were receiving the same medical care that would be given to human casualties. As Dr. Chen continued her work, Zexthul found himself thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The humans had not defeated the Kethmoran through superior strength or advanced technology. They had won by being unpredictable, by refusing to follow the rules that had governed galactic warfare for millennia. Your daughter, he said weakly. She could have surrendered at Proxima Station. I would have taken her as a slave, but she would have lived. Dr. Chen's hands paused for a moment before continuing their work. Sarah knew that, but she also knew that sometimes you have to stand up to bullies even when you know you can't win. She died so that other people wouldn't have to live in fear. The words hit Zexthul harder than any weapon. For 3 centuries his people had ruled through fear, taking what they wanted from species too terrified to fight back. But the humans had refused to be afraid. More than that, they had taught the rest of the galaxy that fear was a choice. I do not understand your kind, Zexthul admitted. You fight like demons when threatened, but show mercy to defeated enemies. You sacrifice yourselves for strangers, but hunt your enemies across the galaxy. What are you? Dr. Chen finished sealing one of his wounds and moved on to the next. We're what happens when a species learns to be both predator and protector. We can be monsters when we need to be, but we choose to be something better when we can. As the medical team worked, Zexthul felt his life slowly ebbing away. The injuries were too severe even for human medicine, but the process of dying gave him time to think, to understand what had really happened in this war. The humans had not simply defeated the Kethmoran. They had transformed them into something they had never been before, the hunted instead of the hunters. More importantly, they had shown the galaxy that predators could be tamed, that bullies could be stopped, that victims could become victors. Doctor, Zexthul said as his vision began to dim, I must tell you something. Your species, you have done something that no one thought possible. Dr. Chen looked up from her scanner. What's that? You have made us afraid, he whispered. For the first time in our history, the Kethmoran know fear. Not fear of death in battle, but fear of what we might become if we continue to be what we have always been. The human doctor studied his face carefully. What do you mean? Zexthul's breathing became labored as his biomechanical organs began shutting down, but he forced himself to continue speaking. Your people do not just defeat enemies. You change them. You make them question everything they believed about themselves. When my warriors saw humans choosing death over surrender, they began to wonder if they had the same courage. When they saw you showing mercy to prisoners, they began to ask if cruelty was truly strength. He paused, gathering what remained of his strength for his final words. We thought we were the apex predators of the galaxy. We believed that might made right, that the strong should rule the weak. But you showed us something worse than death, worse than defeat. You showed us what we could have been if we had chosen differently. Dr. Chen leaned closer as his voice faded to barely a whisper. Your species is terrifying, Zexthul said, his eyes focusing on hers with the last of his awareness. Not because you are stronger than us, not because your weapons are more powerful. You are terrifying because you make your enemies want to be better than they are. You make them afraid of staying monsters when they could choose to be something else. His breathing stopped, then resumed one final time as he spoke his last words. We never had a chance against you humans. Because you made us afraid of what we might become. Captain Zexthal, the last great pirate lord of the Kethmoran Syndicate, died in the arms of the mother of the woman he had killed. Around him, human medics continued working to save the lives of his crew, not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to show mercy even to their enemies. Dr. Chen closed the dead alien's eyes and stood slowly, her medical work complete. Outside the crashed ship, she could hear the sounds of rebuilding beginning. Humans and aliens working together to repair the damage caused by centuries of piracy and fear. The war was over, but its real victory was not measured in ships destroyed or enemies defeated. The real victory was that the galaxy had learned something new about what was possible when people chose to stand up to bullies, to sacrifice for strangers and to show mercy even to those who had shown them none. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through force. They had conquered it through the simple idea that what you choose to become matters more than what you start as. And in the wreckage of the last Kethmoran flagship, surrounded by the evidence of her daughter's ultimate victory, Dr. Elizabeth Chen understood that some wars are won not by destroying your enemies, but by teaching them to destroy themselves.